Fortnite, a game that revolutionized the gaming world with its thrilling battle royale mode, is known for its exciting, action-packed gameplay. Players from around the world engage in intense combat, strategizing their way to victory in a digital arena. However, behind the virtual victories and celebrations, there lies a darker side to this seemingly innocent game. In 2019, the world was rocked by a tragic event involving two gamers, a deadly rivalry, and a gruesome murder. The event began like any other night, two teenagers logging into Fortnite for a match. But as the evening unfolded, it would end in horror and heartbreak, leaving both families, the gaming community, and law enforcement stunned. David, a 16-year-old high school junior, was an avid Fortnite player. His passion for the game was unrivaled. He played for hours every day, dominating his friends and building an online reputation as one of the best in his community. But his obsession with the game went beyond friendly competition. He was determined to be the best, willing to do whatever it took to maintain his winning streak. On the other side of the screen was Ryan, another teenager who had grown up playing video games. He and David had been friends for a while, sharing countless hours together in virtual battlefields. Initially, their sessions were filled with camaraderie and lighthearted competition. They would joke, strategize, and challenge each other to improve. It was all in good fun. However, as David's skill in Fortnite improved, so did his ego. He began to see every loss as a personal failure, and every victory as a validation of his abilities. Ryan, on the other hand, began to struggle with keeping up. As David's skill level grew, their friendship started to sour. One fateful evening, the tension between them reached its boiling point. They had been playing Fortnite for hours when a heated argument broke out. It started over a simple disagreement about strategy. But David's temper flared when Ryan made a comment about his playing style, calling him predictable and easy to beat. To David, it was a challenge to his pride, and he couldn't let it slide. "You think you can do better than me?" David shouted, his voice rising with anger. Ryan, trying to keep it cool, responded, "I'm just saying, maybe you're not as invincible as you think." The words stung, but it was David's reaction that took things too far. He logged off abruptly, his screen going black. Ryan, confused, assumed it was a typical tantrum. Little did he know, David was stewing with anger. He didn't just want to beat Ryan. He wanted to prove something deeper to himself. And that night, the rivalry took a sinister turn. Chapter 2. A Silent Obsession. David couldn't shake the anger he felt from the argument. His obsession with the game had already begun to consume him, and now he saw Ryan as the ultimate obstacle. Every time they played together, David felt his ego being chipped away, and his need for dominance grew stronger. As he lay in bed that night, David couldn't stop thinking about Ryan's words. "Maybe you're not as invincible as you think." That phrase echoed in his mind, and a dark idea began to form. What if he could beat Ryan? Really beat him? Not just in the game, but in life. The next morning, David logged onto his computer with a single purpose: to destroy Ryan's confidence, to show him that no one was better than him, and to make Ryan regret every single word. He began to research ways to get inside Ryan's head, to mentally break him. His obsession escalated. Soon, he was doing more than just strategizing. He was plotting. David began sending Ryan cryptic messages while they played together. They started out as innocent jabs about his gameplay, but soon they became more personal. David began to dig into Ryan's social media accounts, looking for ways to exploit his weaknesses. He learned about Ryan's insecurities, his family troubles, and his lack of self-confidence. David used all of this to taunt him during their matches. "Your parents don't care about you, do they?" David typed in the chat after a close match. "No wonder you're so obsessed with this game." At first, Ryan laughed it off, thinking it was just another one of David's jokes. But the comments grew darker and more targeted. Ryan started to feel a knot in his stomach. Something didn't feel right. The game, which had once been a source of joy, was now becoming a psychological battleground. Chapter 3. Crossing the Line. The toxic behavior escalated over the next few weeks. David became more and more obsessed with breaking Ryan down. The jokes, the taunts, and the insults grew more personal and more cutting. It was no longer just about the game. It was about power. It was about control. Ryan, who had once been the target of friendly banter, was now living in fear. He began to dread playing with David. The once carefree matches had turned into a nightmare. Every time they played, David would target him, ridicule him, and tear him down. Ryan started losing confidence, not just in the game, but in himself. His grades slipped and he became withdrawn, losing touch with his friends and family. But David, still driven by his need for dominance, only pushed harder. "You can't even beat me at your own game," David taunted one evening. "You're worthless. Just quit." Ryan's frustration boiled over, but he didn't know how to fight back. He was trapped in a toxic cycle, unsure of how to escape. The messages grew more disturbing, and David began to make threats. "If you can't beat me in the game, maybe I'll make you feel like you've lost in real life," he said one night. The line between the virtual world and reality began to blur. Ryan's mental state deteriorated. He began to spiral into depression, unsure of how to escape David's hold on him. He couldn't quit the game. It was the only thing that kept him connected to the world. But at the same time, it was the source of all his misery. Chapter 4. The Breaking Point. As weeks passed, Ryan's mental state worsened. He became a shadow of the person he once was. His grades plummeted even further, and his parents began to notice a shift in his behavior. He was no longer the happy teenager who once spent his free time with friends. Instead, Ryan retreated into himself, spending countless hours playing Fortnite, desperately trying to escape from the cruelty he was experiencing. David, meanwhile, continued his torment with no sign of slowing down. Every night, he would log on and challenge Ryan, unleashing a new wave of psychological abuse. He even went so far as to send Ryan disturbing messages suggesting that Ryan's life would never improve unless he accepted David's dominance. "You're nothing," David would write. "Just another worthless player who will never rise above me. You'll never escape this." Ryan, who had always struggled with self-esteem issues, felt himself sinking deeper into a hole. His isolation grew. Even when his parents tried to intervene, he pushed them away, consumed by his need to be accepted by the gaming community, and most of all, to prove that he was better than David. The turning point came one fateful night when David's taunting crossed a new boundary. After a particularly brutal defeat in Fortnite, David messaged Ryan directly. This time, his words weren't just cruel, they were deeply manipulative. "Maybe you should just end it all," David typed, "so I can finally show the world who's in control. You're a joke, Ryan, and everyone's better off without you." Ryan sat there staring at the screen, the weight of David's words crushing him. For the first time, he seriously entertained the idea. The pain from the constant bullying, the isolation, the inability to escape his torment, it was too much. In that moment, he felt like he had nowhere to turn. David had won, or so he thought. Chapter 5. The Darkest Hour. At this point, Ryan had become numb. He barely felt anything as he logged into the game again that night, even though he knew the cycle would repeat itself. The insults would fly, the manipulation would begin again, and he would lose once more. But what he didn't know was that his parents, having noticed his drastic change, had been investigating his gaming habits. Ryan's mother, worried about his sudden withdrawal, had started looking into his online activity. She found that he had been spending excessive amounts of time playing Fortnite and noticed the negative tone of his interactions with David. She felt an overwhelming sense of dread when she saw the messages David had been sending. "Maybe you should just end it all." Ryan's mother, horrified and heartbroken, immediately contacted Ryan's father, and together they rushed to his room, fearing the worst. When they burst through the door, Ryan was sitting at his desk, staring blankly at his computer screen. "Ryan, honey, we need to talk," his mother said, her voice trembling with concern. Ryan didn't respond. He didn't even look up from the screen. It took hours for Ryan to open up to them, and when he did, his confession was painful to hear. "I can't do it anymore," he said quietly. "I just can't beat him. Every night it's the same. I'm nothing. I'm worthless. I don't matter." Ryan's parents were devastated. They had no idea how deep his struggle ran, but they were determined to help their son through this crisis, no matter what it took. Chapter 6. David's Dark Descent. While Ryan's family began to fight for him, trying to pull him back from the brink, David's behavior escalated even further. The intensity of his obsession with defeating Ryan reached an all-time high. His entire identity seemed to revolve around proving his dominance, not just in the game, but in Ryan's life. David had been playing video games for years, but Fortnite had become more than just a hobby. It had become his obsession. He told himself that he was the best, that he was untouchable. His need for control was fueled by a combination of insecurity and a desire for validation. The online world was the only place where he felt truly powerful. But the more he pushed Ryan, the more it started to backfire. David's own behavior began to alienate him from others. His friends started noticing his increasingly aggressive and toxic behavior. He would play hours of Fortnite, not just to win, but to break others. Even his once loyal gaming group began to distance themselves from him, tired of his relentless need to dominate and control every game. One evening, as David played with a new group of friends, he realized he had gone too far. The sense of victory that had once filled him with pride now felt hollow. The satisfaction of destroying Ryan was fleeting, and in its place was a gnawing emptiness. David's desperation grew. He no longer knew where to find his validation. He had burned bridges with nearly every person he knew, and his obsession with Ryan had left him more isolated than ever. But there was one thing that David didn't realize. His actions had set off a chain of events that would soon lead to his own downfall. Chapter 7. The Aftermath. It was a Sunday afternoon when the news broke. Ryan, who had been struggling with his mental health for months, had taken the tragic step of ending his life. His parents were shattered, as was his entire community. No one could have predicted that a game, a virtual world, could have such a profound impact on someone's real life. David, despite his growing remorse, was completely blindsided when the news came out. At first, he tried to convince himself that it wasn't his fault, that it was just a coincidence. But deep down, he knew. The guilt gnawed at him like a constant ache. His obsession with defeating Ryan, his cruel words, and his manipulative behavior had pushed Ryan over the edge. David's guilt spiraled out of control. He couldn't shake the image of Ryan's final moments. The look of hopelessness that had filled his friend's eyes, the words David had sent that had broken him. It was too much to bear. David's world, once dominated by the thrill of victory, had come crashing down. In the weeks that followed, David's life unraveled. The police investigated Ryan's death, and it wasn't long before they uncovered the disturbing messages David had sent. David's name was soon associated with the tragedy, and his reputation as a gamer was shattered. The community that had once praised his skill in Fortnite now turned on him, labeling him a villain, a person who had allowed his obsession to destroy a life. David's story became a cautionary tale for gamers everywhere, a reminder of the dangers of allowing virtual relationships to bleed into the real world, and how far obsession can go when unchecked. Epilogue. A lesson in humanity. The tragic story of David and Ryan serves as a stark reminder that the online world is not without its consequences. Behind every game, every message, and every interaction, there are real people with real emotions. Obsessive behavior, bullying, and manipulation may seem like mere words on a screen, but they can have devastating effects. As for David, he would spend the rest of his life grappling with the impact of his actions. His once thriving gaming career was over, and he was left to face the truth of what he had done. For Ryan, the tragedy was a heartbreaking loss that left his family and friends grieving. They would forever carry the weight of a young life taken too soon, all because of an obsession that spiraled out of control. This story serves as a powerful reminder that in the digital age, we must remember to treat others with kindness and empathy, both online and offline. No game, no victory is worth sacrificing someone's well-being. Deadly Tactics. The Call of Duty Crime Files. The world of Call of Duty had always been a virtual battleground, a place where gamers honed their skills, formed alliances, and fought through war-torn landscapes. But for a handful of players, the war zone was more than just pixels on a screen. It was a hunting ground. When 27-year-old Jeremy Novak, a well-known Call of Duty streamer, was found dead in his apartment in Pittsburgh. The gaming community was shaken to its core. Jeremy had amassed thousands of followers on Twitch, where he played for hours daily, engaging with fans and participating in high-stakes tournaments. His sudden and brutal murder made headlines, but the details were even more disturbing. His body was found slumped in his gaming chair, the glow of his monitor still illuminating the blood spatter on the walls. Police noted that there were no signs of forced entry. His headset was still on, and his Call of Duty lobby was active, filled with players chatting, unaware that their teammate had just been murdered in real life. The case took an even darker turn when detectives discovered that Jeremy had received threats online. Not the typical toxic gamer banter, but precise, chilling threats, warning him that his actions in-game had real-life consequences. His most recent videos showed him exposing cheaters, calling them out for using hacks in high-profile tournaments. One particular video, titled "Busting the Worst Cheater in COD History," had gained massive attention just days before his death. In the video, he confronted a player who went by the gamertag Shadow Recon, a notoriously elusive figure in the Call of Duty competitive scene. As investigators sifted through the threats, they found multiple messages from Shadow Recon, including one that read, "You think you're untouchable behind a screen? Think again. You'll pay for what you did." But the police were dealing with something far more intricate than an enraged gamer. Jeremy's financial records showed he had received anonymous donations totaling over $50,000 in the past year from a source traced to an offshore account. It turned out that Jeremy had been investigating not just individual cheaters, but an organized network that ran illicit gambling rings on Call of Duty tournaments. Players were betting thousands on matches that were rigged from the start. If someone like Jeremy exposed them, millions of dollars could be lost. The deeper detectives dug, the more they realized that Jeremy's death wasn't a simple case of online threats escalating. It was a targeted assassination, a crime syndicate in the shadows. Further analysis of the Call of Duty servers led investigators to private Discord channels and underground betting forums. These were not just small-time gambling groups. They were sophisticated operations with connections to international crime syndicates. As police tracked Shadow Recon's IP address, they found a tangled web of VPNs and proxies shielding the user's real location. But a breakthrough came when an FBI cyber unit uncovered an alias linked to an old criminal investigation in Eastern Europe. The alias matched a former hacker for hire known as Dmitry Kalenkov, a Russian national with suspected ties to underground cybercriminal organizations. Kalenkov had been off the radar for years, and now he had reemerged under the name Shadow Recon, using Call of Duty as a platform for something far more sinister. He and his network were using the game to launder money through fake bets, paying off players to throw matches while keeping a low profile under the guise of a gaming community. But Kalenkov wasn't the only threat. Authorities soon discovered a chilling pattern. Several other Call of Duty streamers and competitive players had disappeared or died under suspicious circumstances in the past 3 years. Some were ruled suicides, others as accidental overdoses. Now, Jeremy's case was the missing piece that linked them all together. Hunting the Hunters. The FBI launched an international sting operation, setting up a fake gaming profile under the name Bullet Ghost to infiltrate the underground network. Agents disguised as high-stakes bettors gained access to encrypted Discord servers where match-fixing deals were brokered. Over weeks of surveillance, they identified multiple key figures involved in the operation, including recruiters who targeted young gamers, convincing them to participate in rigged matches in exchange for large payouts. Those who refused were threatened or worse. But the real challenge was locating Kalenkov. He was a ghost, vanishing each time law enforcement got close. Until one night, during a high-profile Call of Duty tournament, streamed to over 100,000 viewers, a hacker claiming to be Bullet Ghost sent a chilling message in the tournament's live chat. "Shadow Recon, we see you. We know what you did to Jeremy. Game over." Within hours, an IP address in Prague pinged back to the server. It was a fatal mistake. Authorities stormed a luxury apartment in the city, arresting Kalenkov along with two other cybercriminals. With their leader gone, the operation collapsed. Dozens of arrests followed worldwide, and Call of Duty's underground betting rings were dismantled. But for Jeremy's friends, it was a hollow victory. The gaming community had lost one of its own, a player who had fought not just against cheaters, but against a dark industry that had infiltrated their beloved game. His story became a cautionary tale, a reminder that even in virtual worlds, real dangers lurk in the shadows. Epilogue: The next threat. Months after the arrests, Call of Duty developers implemented new security measures to combat cheating and illicit gambling. But as one war ended, another began. A new player had appeared in the gaming world, someone using the alias Phantom Strike. Their playstyle was eerily familiar, and their messages in-game carried a warning. You may have won this round, but the war has just begun. The FBI's cyber unit flagged the account immediately. It was registered from an unknown location. The hunt was far from over.